Hello, Year 9, and welcome to a new term and a new topic in geography. This term, we're going to look at a topic called development, and to start off, we're going to discuss the methods used to measure development. So, for this lesson, our learning objectives are first of all, understand development, what HIC, NEE, LIC means. We're then going to describe the distribution of HICs and LICs around the world, so where are HICs and LICs found in the world. And then finally, we're going to understand the different ways we can measure development and their strengths and weaknesses. So how do we measure if a country is a HIC or an LIC? And then we're going to look at whether those different measures are good or bad. So equipment you need is in the bottom left-hand corner. Okay, you're going to need the internet. You're going to use WordWall. You need a pen and paper or a Word document, either or, doesn't matter which one you use, as long as when you're using pen and paper that your writing is clear so we can read it when you upload it to ClassCharts. Just a quick reminder of know your level. And again, not saying anybody's stuck on these levels. You can do a higher level if you feel like you want to push yourself. But if you're a grade up to a grade 4, we expect you to be doing developing tasks. If you are 5 to 6, you should be doing the secure task. And if you are a 7 or above your MG grade, you should be doing the mastered tasks. Moving on to learning objective 1 then is to look at what development is. Okay, so first thing I'm going to ask you to do is use a WordWall activity to create a definition for development. So for developing tasks, can you open up WordWall, create a definition using the WordWall activity? For secured, you then need to use a piece of paper or a Word document, and then you're going to give me two examples of countries with high levels of development, and then I want you to explain why they have high levels of development. So this country has a high level of development because. Okay, for mastered, you're going to move on then. Can you think of a country with high level of development and a country with a low level of development? And then I want you to explain why their levels of development are different. Okay, once you've done this, I want you to take a screenshot of your WordWall and your mastered and secured tasks ready to upload to ClassCharts. Before we move on to our second learning objective, I just want you to read through the definitions for LIC, HIC, and NEE. Definitions are on this slide, so I'm just going to ask you to pause the video now and read through the definitions. Moving on to lesson objective 2 of this lesson, we're going to look at where HIC and LIC countries are located around the world. Now, the question we're going to look at is, using figure 1, describe the global distribution of wealth. So if we just break that question down, it's just asking you, tell me the global pattern of a rich country. So where are all the rich countries found around the world? Okay, so as this is a describe question, we're going to use GCSE to answer this question, so the GCSE acronym to answer it. Before we do that, I just want to go through how we read the map that's in front of us. And the map that we've got in front of us is a chloropleth map. Each country is divided up so we can see all the different countries. It is also color coded, and if you look at the key, it tells you what each color represents. Now, this map is looking at GNI per capita. GNI per capita just means how much money per person is made each year in each country. Okay, so the highest you could earn in terms of this map is $43,430, whereas the least you could earn is below $840. So using this graph, we're going to answer the question, describe the global distribution of wealth. So what is the pattern of wealth across the globe? Okay, so we're going to use GCSE. First thing we're going to do is look at our general trends. So what is generally happening on this graph? So first thing we're going to do is we're going to divide the world up using the equator, and we're going to look if there's a difference between the north and the south of the globe. So does the north have more wealth, or does the south have more wealth? Okay, that would be our general trend. We're then going to move on to then look at the closer in, and we're going to pick out specific continents. So which continents have the highest wealth around the world? And again, you need to look at your key, look at the areas that are the darkest shade of blue, and that will tell us where those continents are. We're going to look specifically next, and we're going to look at specific countries within those continents, and you're going to use data, so that's where we're going to look back up and look for those countries that are the same color as $43,430. So you need to pick out those countries, and that would be your specifically. Now, for your exception, you need to look for an anomaly to your general trend. So that means something that doesn't match what you said in your general trend. So if you've said all the wealth is in the north, however, there's a country in the south or a continent in the south that is still of high wealth, that goes against your general trend, and that would be your exception, okay? So the task I'm going to ask you to do now then is to answer that question. So for developing, I'd like you to answer the 3 red boxes. So use the sentence starters, and the first 3 red boxes, you are going to answer them. For secured, I want you to complete the red boxes and the green box. So you do the generally, closer in specifically, and then you do the exception as well for secured. For mastered, once you've finished your answer to this question, I want you to answer this following question. Why do you think this pattern of wealth exists? And explain your answer. So I think this pattern exists because. So once you've done that, you need to just take a quick picture of your answer ready to upload to ClassCharts. Can you pause the video now just so you can complete this task? Okay, moving on to our further learning objective of this lesson. We've already looked at how we define what development is within a country. We've looked at where HIC and LIC countries are located within the world. We're now going to look at how we decide whether a country is a HIC or an LIC, and we're going to do this by measuring development. Now, we measure development in many different ways, and they link to both social and economic development. So they either link to the country making money or a country's social well-being, and that just means how well people within a country are looked after. Now, on the slide, I've just put up 7 images which represent different ways that we can measure development, so how well developed a country is. What I want you to do is just pause the video in a minute and think about what each image represents in terms of a way that we measure social or economic development within the country, okay? So just pause the video now and have a think about what you think each picture might represent. Okay, so I've given you a bit of time there to think about what each image represents. So I'm just going to go through the headings for each one. So the first one is your GNI, or your gross national income, and that's what we just saw in the previous task when we looked at the map of the world looking at the wealthy countries. So this links to the amount of money that a country is making. We then put up birth rate, which is telling us how many babies are being born within a country. Now, this is one of those measures that, if it's a high birth rate, actually is a negative thing, not a positive. So that means that actually it shows the low levels of development. So if you've got a high birth rate, it shows you low levels of development. Same with death rates. That's telling us how many people are dying within a country. And again, if your death rate is high, that again shows us that you've got low levels. So you want a low death rate to show that you've got a high level of development. Okay, next one then is our literacy rate. And literacy rate is telling us how many adults can read and write within a country. Okay, we've got access to safe water, that is drinking water, so how many people have access to clean drinking water. We've got doctors per person, so how many doctors are there per person in the country. And then finally, you've got your life expectancy, and that just tells us how long on average people will live. And again, if you've got a high life expectancy, that means generally that you've got higher levels of development. Okay, so these are just 7 of the examples. We're going to look at a couple of more for our following task, and our following task then starts off by using a word wall matchup activity. So you're going to pause the video when I've finished explaining the tasks, and you're going to go over to word wall and you're going to complete the matchup exercise where you link up the measure of development to its definition. Once you've done that, you're going to move on to the secured task, and you're going to explain what each measure of development means for the country's level of development. So like I said earlier, birth rate, just because it's high doesn't mean that actually you've got a high level of development. So some of the ratings will have high levels, some of the measures, will have high levels. That doesn't mean you've got a high level of development. So for example, with birth rate, if your birth rate is high, this means you have a low level of development, so you're not very developed because, and that's where you'd explain the fact that maybe your healthcare and education aren't as good because they haven't been educated on contraception. Healthcare, they might not have access to contraception, so that's why they have more babies. They have more babies because they do farming jobs and they want more hands to work on the farm. So that would show that they're low level of development. Whereas if you've got a low birth rate, that would show you've got high levels of development because you've got more women going out to work. That means that they may be doing career jobs. They don't have the time to have big families, so they may be only having one child, whereas before they were maybe having 2 or 3. And again, this shows that there is more development because you've got more people working within a country making more money. Okay, so that's just an example. I want you to do that for the other measures of development as well. For mastered, then, I want you to create strengths and weaknesses for each method. So I want you to tell me what a good thing is of that measure of development or a bad thing. And again, if you go on to class charts, there's a Word document on there that has ideas of what you can think about that would be good and bad things for each one. And again, it's got the full list of each measure of development, so you can go through each one. So I'm going to ask you to pause the video now, and once you've finished doing the task, just take a picture of your work ready to upload to class charts. Right, that brings us to the end of today's lesson. Just before you finish, can I just go through what I expect you to upload to class charts? So I want a screenshot of your definition of development along with your explanation of the country's development. That links to our first learning objective, which is understanding development, HIC, NEEs, and NIC meanings. We're then going to ask you to upload your measures of development, so what each measurement for development means, and if you did the master task of your positives and negatives or your strengths and weaknesses of each measure of development. And again, that just links to our last learning objective, which was understanding the ways to measure development as well as their strengths and limitations. Okay, so once you've uploaded those pieces of work, you have finished today's lesson. So well done for participating in today's home learning. We're all looking forward to seeing your work. Keep up the good work, year 9.